Attention sports teams. Let us introduce you to the best fan engagement tool in the game, .vote. By getting a .vote web address for your team, you can allow fans to engage and interact with big-time decisions. In a single click, not only can fans make their opinions heard, but sports teams get a better understanding of their fans' interests. Keep your fans engaged. Simply visit GoDaddy.com today, type in the desired name of your web address, and let the voting begin.
Is the Chiefs dynasty done? The wildest sports betting scandal that somehow has not been bigger news, and the Texas high school football story you gotta hear to believe. It's all straight ahead on this edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. Off and running. Welcome into another episode of Gordon Damer on Sports. Lots to get into on the podcast today. Lots of sports to cover. I did want to hit on the big NFL takeaway from Week 11. Lots of good games, lots of takeaways, but there's one major one that's going to have implications for the rest of the regular season and very well could impact things in a big way come the playoffs. So we'll hit on that today. Plus, we've covered in a lot of sports betting scandals. I keep trying to get away from them, but they keep popping up in my feed. I guess I have trained my algorithm to bring me more sports betting scandals. The one today tops them all. This one is the most wild and really a warning sign for sports leagues in North America. That's all I'll tell you right now. And then we all know how much Texas loves their high school football. We got a Texas high school football story today that's pretty wild as well. But before we get started too deep, please hit that subscribe button, like, share, subscribe to the episode. We got about a week to go before our Nick Ticket giveaway. So you got to be subscribed on YouTube for your chance to win that. So make sure you are subscribed to Gordon Damer on Sports. All right, let's get into it. We'll start things off with the NFL because there were a bunch of fascinating games in Week 11. And I got to be honest, the NFL season, I don't feel like has been great so far, but that generally tells you that there are going to be big moments in the weeks to come. But to me, the major takeaway from Week 11, even when I look back on the schedule, I think that it is the Broncos beating the Chiefs and doing it in the fashion that they did. Week 11, if you watch the NFL at this point, and you've watched it for the last decade or so, it definitely has become a trend in the last decade or so. Week 11 now, because of all the rounds of the playoffs and all the teams that make it, Week 11 is basically the starting point of the real season for the contenders, not just for everybody. First 10 weeks, everybody can have their fun. The bad teams have their fun sometimes, but this is when the bell rings for the championship contenders. Those first 10 weeks, especially with the minimization of the preseason, teams are kind of figuring out who they are, especially over the first month. But now that we get to Week 11, the back half of the regular season and the postseason's not too far away, when you include the playoffs, this is when the race to a championship really begins. And you see that even when you don't think about it. It's the reason why we don't believe, even now, in the Indianapolis Colts. They've had a fine season. Nothing to take away from the Indianapolis Colts, but nobody thinks that they're going to be in the AFC Championship game this year. Nobody's counting on those first 10 weeks of what they did, as good as it was. It's the same reason nobody's counting out the Baltimore Ravens at this point. And here's the thing. As we hit the starting gun of the real NFL season for the contenders, the Kansas City Chiefs find themselves in a place that they have never been in the Patrick Mahomes era. And where they are is in a position of vulnerability. And they are kind of running out of road. 5-5 for the Kansas City Chiefs for the first time in basically a decade. They are not going to win the AFC West. Think about that. This is a team that is not judged by winning their division. That's supposed to be a given. 2015 is the last time they did not win the division. Back then, Alex Smith was their quarterback. Back then, Tyreek Hill was still in college. That's how long ago it was. It was Andy Reid's third year in Kansas City. So think about how long ago that was. And since that point, it's been a given. They have won the division title 9 years in a row. That is an insane run of dominance in the modern NFL. That does not generally happen. And maybe, I'm not thinking about all the individual years, but it feels like in most of those years, if not in all of them, they've kind of coasted to an AFC West. It was not really coming right down to the wire. Usually their focus was more not about the division, but about the conference. Are they going to be the number 1 seed? Are they going to have a bye in the opening round of the playoffs? And is the entire AFC playoffs going to run through Arrowhead? But not this year. And right now, whether or not they're even included in the playoffs, I think is a question, because the first 11 weeks have exposed the Chiefs in ways that we have never seen with the great Patrick Mahomes. And the truth is, and look, Kansas City Chiefs fans are probably not going to want to hear this, but if you're not a Kansas City Chief fan, you're going to be delighted to think about this as a possibility. They basically need to be next to perfect, if not perfect, just to make the postseason this year. Again, 5-5. And while the AFC is wide open, they are not sitting in a very good position. So we'll run through all of it here and why I think it's realistic to wonder if this team has kind of run out of gas on their dynasty and their championship run, because it's a very real question heading into week 12. Think about the last time we were heading into week 12 and we thought to ourselves, could the Kansas City Chiefs miss the playoffs? That seems like something that maybe got floated once in a while after 2 weeks of the regular season when things are more fluky. But for NFL fans, I'm sure that for a lot of them, this still seems like it's impossible. And most of you probably aren't there yet to truly consider whether or not the Chiefs could miss the playoffs. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure that I'm there just yet, but it's getting too close to be part of that time where the red flags are getting harder and harder to ignore, right? It's not just that they're not going to win their division. They've been beaten by a lot of teams in their division. So it does feel at this point, right, heading into week 12, there's still time for them to right the ship, but it feels like that moment in like a TV show or a movie where the hero's in trouble and you think to yourself, well, he's going to get out of this somehow, because if he doesn't, there's no more TV show left. Well, I remember thinking the same kind of thing watching the Red Wedding in Game of Thrones, thinking, wow, how's Robb Stark going to get out of this mess? And he didn't get out of the mess. And I've always said that championship windows sometimes close a lot quicker than we expect, right? We just think that things are going to run on forever and ever. And it doesn't generally turn out that way. So when was the last time anyone was wondering about the Chiefs looking human, especially with Patrick Mahomes as their quarterback? I don't think there are times where they have not seemed sharp, but this extent, to be a 500 team through the opening 11 weeks of the season, that is not a position we generally find the Kansas City Chiefs. And we just assume, if they're 6-4, they're 7-3, they'll just kind of figure things out. And this is a team, obviously, that has the hardware of Super Bowl championships. But this year kind of feels a little different, just from that opening week when they lost to the LA Chargers. I always go to call them the San Diego Chargers. When they lost the Chargers in Brazil. It's a team that has failed to score 24 points in 5 games this year. It's not the explosive Chiefs offense that we've come to expect. They've gone multiple stretches of games where it seems like it's a struggle for them to score in the second half. That's another thing that we did, with the Chiefs. Usually they need a score, they get a score. That was not the case on Sunday against the Broncos. When that game was tied, you figure, the Chiefs are going to find a way. They didn't find a way. And they also are doing more. I don't know that they lead the league, but they're probably top 10 in terms of drop passes and drive-killing mistakes. So Mahomes is still Mahomes. He's still got all the creativity and all the ability to escape disaster. But a lot of times, Superman is being let down by the other superheroes on the team, and it feels like Kansas City's margin of error is smaller than it has ever been before. And maybe this shouldn't be so much of a surprise, because last year in close games, they were perfect. They won a perfect 10-0 in one-score games. They always found a way to escape danger, and you just kind of come to expect it, right? It's the Chiefs. They're going to figure out a way. It's inevitable. But this year, the mistakes are starting to add up. Red zone turnovers. Patrick Mahomes never has red zone turnovers. He's had 2 so far this year. He had another one at a 21-yard line. So those are some big mistakes. And then another area where they've always been locked down is special teams, and that's not been the case this year. Missed kicks, blocks extra point, short kicks offs. It's all, you name it, it's happened. So they've had some issues in special teams. and other areas as well. Blitz inefficiency. Last year, they were 9th in pressure rate. This year, they are dead last. We have seen, out of all the things that can fell the great Patrick Mahomes, pressure, it gets to him like it gets to everybody else. He is a mere mortal. We've seen it in Super Bowls in big ways. And, Kansas City used to win all those little hidden yardage areas. And this year, they're not just losing some of them, they're losing all of them. Now, I don't want to paint too ugly a picture for the Chiefs because the advanced metrics, all the analytics stuff, they still really like the Chiefs. They still think that they have a very good chance of making the playoffs. And again, if you're saying the AFC is wide open, tie goes to the defending champ, right? So the advanced analytics, they love the Chiefs. Last year, their point differential per game was, I think, 6 a game. This year, it's 7 per game. Their average margin of victory in their wins this year has been 19 points. Last year, it was less than that. Their expected win total, now they pulled out all those games last year and ended up winning 15 games, but the Pythagorean theorem of expected based on the points they score was about 10 wins. This year, they're expected to win based on that about 11 games. DVOA, they're 5th this year. Last year, they were 6th. EPA, they're up this year from being down last year, both offensively and defensively. So it's almost like the advanced metrics will tell you that the Chiefs are better in a lot of ways than they were last year. The problem is the one stat that does not say that is the wins and losses. Now, last year, they got the benefit of a lot of fortunate breaks. Some of those breaks they made, some of those breaks were handed to them, but this year, those breaks are not going their way. So while all the advanced metrics will tell you, there's not really a need to worry, they're sitting in 3rd place in the AFC West. There's a bunch of teams that are sitting in front of them. And if they suddenly flip the switch like we've seen championship teams be able to do, well, then there's nothing really to worry about. And they could be the team this year that's sitting there and going on a run and end up in a Super Bowl and who knows, winning a Super Bowl. But the difference this year, last year, the Chiefs won all those small battles. Every single one of them went their way. And so far this year, they are not going their way. All of them are not going their way. And again, first time in a decade, they will not win the division. So let's get a little into the division picture because this is where things get messy. This is where it starts to get messy. And then it just kind of gets worse and worse when you take a look at their schedule remaining and the teams and the tiebreakers and the battles that they can't win because of games that they've already lost. So in the past, the AFC West, it was like a Costco membership. It just like automatically renewed every single year. The Kansas City Chiefs, AFC West champions, AFC West champions every single year. But it started this year with the Chargers in Brazil, and the Broncos have proven to be a real title contender. Now, at the end of the day, do I believe in the Broncos if it comes right down to it? Probably not. Bo Nix would worry me, but their defense has shown you that they can get after Mahomes. And so far this year, the Chiefs in their division, 1-2, in their conference, 2-4. So when you start to do the math, that does not add up to a team that's got the inside track to a playoff spot. They've lost tiebreakers, and they've given away some games that it feels like at some point, it's got to come back to bite them. And all this matters because the entire Chiefs dynasty has been built on control. They've gone about it in a specific way, controlling their division, usually having a top 1 or a top 2 seed, locking down home playoff games, and forcing opponents to go to Arrowhead in January. That is not going to be the case this year. When they start 5-1, 6-1 every single year, that might be the case. That's not going to be the case this year. This year, they are staring at the realistic possibility of finishing 500 or worse in the division and having to go on the road every single playoff game. We remember the teams that are able to do that. The Giants won a championship doing that way. Generally, going on the road in the playoffs is not a recipe for success in the playoffs. And the tiebreakers, that's a nightmare right now for the Chiefs. Looking up on the Bills, beat the Chiefs. The Chargers, already have a win against the Chiefs earlier this year. Still have another game against them. But as of right now, as we're sitting here, Chargers beat the Chiefs. And then the Jaguars, even the Jacksonville Jaguars beat the Chiefs. Who would have thought in that game that would turn out to be such a monumental game? And when you talk about the Bills, the Chargers, and the Jaguars, those are the three teams right now ahead of the Chiefs in the race for the final three playoff spots. So they currently have a 5-5 record, and the wild card spots are held by teams, all of them hold the tiebreaker. And with Kansas City 2-4 in the AFC, with Indianapolis, who I don't believe in, on deck, all of a sudden that becomes a monumental game. So the remaining schedule for the Chiefs, it does get easier. They have the fifth hardest schedule so far. So, but when you break it down moving forward, they have Indianapolis coming up, which all of a sudden becomes a monumental game for Kansas City. You cannot afford to, it's more, the wins are important, but the losses are as well. As you get to 6 or 7 losses, without the tiebreak, it's gonna be very, very hard to figure out ways to win games and to make the playoffs. They've got the Raiders still to come. They've got the Browns still to come. They've got the Chargers still to come. The Chargers game is at home. That Chargers game to start the year, that was the Chargers home game. They have to go at the Texans. They've got to play at the Steelers, and they wrap up the season against the Broncos one more time, as if they didn't have enough problems with the Broncos on Sunday. So you look at that schedule, Raiders game's easy, Browns game's easy. Some of those games are a little easier, and on paper, you think to yourself, well, that's not a brutal schedule, but in the reality, it's kind of a minefield because they basically have to be perfect. At 5-5, if they can go out there and win 6 of those games and finish at 11-5, okay, they're definitely going to make the playoffs. But each loss drops down those percentages pretty significantly. And all of a sudden at 10-6, with as wide open as the AFC this year, not having the tiebreak, that is not a guaranteed playoff team. And if they ever were to lose 2 of those games, well then, you're sitting at 9-8 on the season. There's a very good chance the Kansas City Chiefs, any team at 9-8, cannot expect to get into the postseason. So some games on that schedule. You take a look at Houston, who's had their offensive problems this year, but they can get after you on defense. They can get after the quarterback, especially. Pittsburgh, many problems as they've had, it seems like that game on the road could be difficult as well. And division games, again, Chargers, Broncos, 2 teams that already have wins against Kansas City this year. And even the Raiders, who are absolutely brutal. Would it shock you out of all the teams just to come up with the game of their life to go out there and beat the Chiefs? They crushed them earlier this year. And I think the Raiders, I don't even know if they had like a first down in the second half. It was such a blowout. But that's one of the rare blowouts that the Chiefs have had this year. So who knows? Like any given Sunday, things can happen. And it would not surprise me at all with how Kansas City has played that if they get picked off again, they probably need to go 5-1 the rest of the way to guarantee themselves a spot in the postseason. Because again, the tiebreakers, they don't have. 4-2 would probably still be good, but you wouldn't want to be waiting for and looking at the scoreboard. That is a very strange position for the Kansas City Chiefs to be scoreboard watching, not to figure out if they're going to be the number 1 seed, not to figure out if they're going to have a first-round bye in the playoffs, but to see if they are even in the postseason. So I know probably most of you are thinking, Gordon, the Chiefs are going to make the play. Yeah, I would agree with you. History would tell you that. But the AFC is a little bit different this year. The Broncos are a little different this year. I think the Chargers match up against certainly they did to open the season. And the Chargers have a history of melting down when the games are the biggest. So maybe that will be another win for them. But you just take a look at the road that the Chiefs are looking at, the Broncos are looking at. There's a very good chance that the Chiefs are the 3rd place team in the AFC West when this is all said and done. And who would have thought that? Who would have thought that coming into the season after it seems like every single year you just pencil in the Chiefs for, at the very least, an AFC title game appearance. And what was the question coming into the year? Can the Bills beat the Chiefs? Can the Ravens beat the Chiefs? Well, the Bills have had their own problems. The Ravens have had their own problems. But you take a look at those three teams right now, I guess the Bills don't really have questions about making the playoffs, although they've not exactly been lights out either. The Ravens got a lot of work to do. Wouldn't it be wild if all three teams didn't end up making the postseason? That would be crazy. But look, we come to expect a certain level of excellence out of the Kansas City Chiefs, and they have not matched that up so far. Now, there is still time. They can still get things worked out, and if they were to get into the tournament, that's exactly what it is. It's a tournament. And the defending champ, there's certain teams in sports where it feels like until they're knocked out, they're the team to beat. Even if they're not favored, even if they're not the favorite going into any individual game, they are still the team to beat. So if the Chiefs do get in and find their way to win 4 or 5 games here down the stretch of what is still not a cakewalk of a schedule, you would think that they will still find a way to win some games come postseason time. But I don't think that this is kind of like the weakest version of the championship Chiefs that we've seen. Like, we thought that, at least I did, getting Rashee Rice back would mean, hey, you know what? They'll find themselves now. They've got their superstar back. Travis Kelce is still dangerous, and this could be his final swan song. They'll figure out ways to run the ball, and their coaching advantage they have every single week, either with Andy Reid on offense or Steve Spagnuolo on defense, they're going to figure out ways to win games. But it just feels like this is the weakest version of this championship contender that we've seen. And maybe this is the time where it's just, they've been kind of taking on water here for a while. And who knows, maybe this is finally the year where it does not click. If that's the case, I think that is it's an embarrassment to Kansas City, because this is, they're one of the teams that is judged not by making the playoffs, but how deep they get into a playoffs. Really, they're one of the few teams where it's either Super Bowl or bust. That's the legacy of having Patrick Mahomes. And, that's a conversation that we're going to have as well if they do end up missing the playoffs or they're one and done in the postseason. When you're talking about the greats, and Mahomes has put himself in that conversation, the great of greats, the GOATs, if you will, those guys are not just great, but they make things feel inevitable. That was the case last year with Kansas City. They felt like they're in a close game, they'll figure out a way to win the game, because they always do. That has not been the case this year. Now 0-5 in one-score games after being 10-0 last year. And for Mahomes, as great a player as he is, and still the best player in the planet, he's never been in this position where it almost feels like he is kind of dragging this roster into the playoffs. His resume, for all of his greatness, he came into a very good situation. And why a lot of times I talk about quarterbacks, it's not just about whether or not the guy will be a success or a failure in the NFL, but what situation does he walk into? Think about the situation Mahomes walked into. The team was already a playoff team before he got there. Now, he took them to another level, but he had the genius of Andy Reid. He's generally had a top 5 offense. He's generally had playmakers all over the field. He's had pretty much a soft division most of his time there. They've always finished, and look, to his credit as well, his play, I'm not saying he was a passenger on the team's success, but they've finished with very high seeds and they've had home playoff games every single year. This year, it will be a different challenge and something that he's never had to do before. He's basically going to have to carry everything, every drive, every time they get the ball, every possession, every single week. And again, they've basically got to be perfect from this point forward. They probably could suffer one more loss, but again, when you talk about one more loss, who is that loss against? Is it against another AFC team? Because all of a sudden that hurts their potential of making the postseason field. So if the Chiefs miss the playoffs this year, I'm not going to get into the whole legacy conversation. It doesn't destroy his legacy. Other guys have had great careers and they've missed the playoffs from time to time, but it does kind of introduce a new narrative into the mix of even Mahomes, even the great Patrick Mahomes couldn't get this version of the Chiefs into the playoffs. And if that becomes part of the narrative, you wonder how that will impact them moving forward. Because look, the Mahomes conversation, it seems like every single year, is always focused on the Brady conversation, about the greatest ever conversation. And missing the playoffs, I don't think that it crushes him because he's still got a lot of time left. But as I said before, with the greats, there's always this feeling of inevitability, right? They're always going to figure out a way. And that aura has kind of been the secret weapon of this entire dynasty. The Chiefs always figure out a way. Sometimes the refs help them figure out a way. And maybe that's the biggest storyline of all. If now all of a sudden the Chiefs are going to be just like a lot of other teams, like another really good team in the field, where they are not the team to beat every single solitary year. And it feels like this year, if they are going to make it and make the playoffs and make a playoff run, this will be the most challenges they've had to overcome. And week 11, again, this is where it begins. So now maybe from this point, if we know this, I'm sure the Kansas City Chiefs have already figured out this as well, that, the dynasty questions are going to be asked every single week from this point on. The playoff question is going to be asked every single week, and the schedule is demanding, and the playoff path is certainly narrowing for them. And for the first time in forever, they've just got to scramble to make the playoff field. And that is not a position the Kansas City Chiefs have been in the Patrick Mahomes era. Now, can he drag them there? Can they stop the bleeding? We will find out. I'm sure, again, if this is the conversation that we're having, I'm sure the Kansas City Chiefs are all aware of this conversation as well. And this final 6-game sprint, would it shock me at all if all of a sudden the Chiefs come out here and flip the switch like they have done at other times, not to this degree, but at other times, and all of a sudden go on a run against even, the Patriots in the playoffs? Would I'd still favor the Chiefs. Against the Bills in the playoffs, I would still favor the Chiefs. Against the Ravens or any other team you want to throw out there, even against the Broncos, who looked so impressive and did what the Chiefs would generally do, find a way to win a game on Sunday, I would still probably favor the Chiefs. But the conversation, they don't just get put in the playoffs. They have to earn that. And right now, they are not a part of that field. They are currently 9th in the AFC. And the AFC is not littered with super teams. It's not like this is going to be an incredible gauntlet. But this is not an issue that Kansas City has ever had to deal with before. And what's interesting is we've seen dynasties die. Generally, it's because a couple of things go wrong, especially injuries. That's not been the case this year. It feels like Kansas City is just kind of getting a little old in the tooth. Mahomes has been healthy. Travis Kelce has been healthy. Chris Jones is there. Rashee Rice is back. Again, these struggles would have been understandable if it was while Rice was serving his suspension. And you kind of expected that they would have some growing pains early on. But that's not where they are. This is week 11, and we're still kind of talking about them being just a 500 team. So after laying all this out, do I think that the Chiefs are going to miss the playoffs? No, I still probably don't. Maybe this has all been an exercise of convincing myself that the Chiefs are more vulnerable than they are. But while the narrative makes me think that the Chiefs will still find a way, the math does not, right? And there will be a team, I will tell you this right now, come back to this episode when we get to the playoffs. There will be a team that is sitting right now struggling for whatever reason. It's not generally the teams that are 9-2 like the Patriots or the Eagles. There's some team that's struggling right now that's going to get on a run. The Bills did it a few years ago where they were 5-5 or 6-6, won a bunch of games in a row to end the season, made the AFC Championship game. 2020, I think the Ravens were in the same kind of situation. Maybe they were 6-5. They went on a run and they made the playoffs, and Lamar won a playoff game. So it's still there to be taken. But we have never seen this version of the Kansas City Chiefs before, and that makes you believe that maybe this is finally the year where all those good calls and all those breaks that went their way in years past, this might finally be the year that those things finally catch up to Kansas City, and come playoff time, the Chiefs are like us, sitting and watching at home. So one of these episodes of Gordon Damer on Sports, we will go an entire episode without talking about sports betting scandals. But unfortunately, that episode is not this episode, because after the NBA scandal and the baseball scandal, I must have trained my algorithms to bring me more of these stories somehow. And the story that came across my eyes this week is from the Turkish Soccer League. If you've not heard about this scandal, This is scandal with a capital S, and maybe all the letters are capital, and it makes what's going on in the NBA and baseball look like absolute child's play. But it's also a warning shot for the NBA and Major League Baseball about what can happen if you're not doing your due diligence. So in the past week, we're talking about hundreds of players involved, dozens of referees involved as well. Last Thursday, the Turkish Football Federation, which is basically their NFL or NBA league office, they suspended 102 top-tier club players and 25 from the Super League, which is their top division, and then 77 other guys from the second tier. And the bans, well, some of them, it doesn't seem like what the guys did was that bad, but it's just so widespread, they have to punish everybody to some degree. So the range of outcomes is 45 game suspensions to a full year. And some of the guys that got caught up in this are big names for their league. Now, they might not mean anything to you or I, and I'll probably butcher their names, but one of the guys, Aaron El Mali, got 45-day ban. He's a 25-year-old, played on the Turkish national team. He got found out for betting a game that he wasn't supposed to be betting from 5 years ago. But still, because of this thing that's widespread, you think, well, that's not so bad. You're talking about this terrible scandal. Oh, no, it just keeps getting worse. Another big-time performer for them was this guy, Medahan Beltassi. I'm probably butchering his name. He admitted to 1,600 bets while on loan from another club. I mean, 1,600 bets. That's a lot of bets involving soccer and some leagues that he was involved in. So those two guys, they're just the tip of the iceberg. In total, there were 1,000 players across all the Turkish professional leagues have been referred to the disciplinary board based on connection to betting. This includes lower divisions, amateur leagues, youth squads. I mean, basically, if you kick a soccer ball in Turkey, chances are you apparently have some sort of betting account on your phone. That's the only thing you can come away with. And it gets crazier because the scandal didn't start with the players. That's where it wound up because they just kept following the money. But actually, hundreds of referees were already implicated, and that's where this really began. So of all the leagues, they had 571 referees, 371, what is that, like 60%, 65% of the referees? Some of them were betting tens of thousands of matches, including ones that they were officiating. One referee, I don't know how the guy even had time to referee any of the matches, he bet on 18,000 matches, including top-tier league, Super League matches, International League matches, and he was involved in some of them as well. So that just shows you how pervasive this type of stuff was. And the Federation president, I'm not going to try to butcher his name, they've said that this is obviously a deep-rooted problem. It did not show up overnight. He wants to clean up, but it's going to be kind of hard to do that because a lot of the referees, they're obviously out of a job. If you get in their league, according to their league mandate, if you get a 45-day suspension, you're already under a license review. So those guys have been kicked out. And the clubs, it's funny, we always talk about the integrity of the product. Some of the teams are protecting the players. They've come out and said, well, in some cases, this is the players are claiming identity theft, that they didn't open these accounts. Somebody else opened these accounts in their name. I don't know. It seems kind of sketchy. Some teams are kind of treading more carefully because they realize, hey, wait a sec, we don't want to blow up our team and lose all our good players in the process, but we do have to do something about this, and this is the major scandal in Turkey, especially for football fans. And then there's been other teams who are constantly, there's one team that, I don't know how to pronounce it, but constantly they are known for always criticizing the officials, and not surprisingly, they've called it a toxic system, and it seems like this is their best evidence that it is actually a toxic system. So this has major ramifications for the World Cup. World Cup teams are being reshuffled because some of the players are involved in this scandal. There were other players for 21 and under and 19 and under clubs that have had to be removed as a result of the scandal. And the story is just so widespread in Turkish football that the investigation, this is, I think, the most beautiful part of the whole story. It was started based on this match between two teams, and the investigation did not start until like a year after the match. And I don't know why they went back, and I guess they traced it from the present to the past, and they found this one match that had a suspicious level of bets placed on it. That's always a red flag. The other, there were no shots on goal in the match. Not a single shot on goal in the match. Now, in fairness to Turkish football, similar betting scandals have happened elsewhere. Germany had one, I think, in 2009 or 2010. China just had one not that long ago. But nothing has happened on this scale where you're talking about thousands of players and hundreds of referees. This is just massive. And it's not just about a couple of guys placing bets on the side. This is not the Guardian scandal where it's just a couple of wild pitches. We're talking about, in some cases, identity fraud, or at least that's being alleged, suspended matches, league complaints, arrests of club officials. I mean, it really is a full-blown scandal. And the ramifications, again, the Turkish league has a transfer window. They've had to move that as a result. Usually it runs from like early January to mid-February. They've had to petition FIFA to be allowed to kind of patch up their teams because so many players are being involved in investigations. And, it's easy to kind of point at it because we have no skin in the game. I don't know that if you're watching Turkish football all that regularly, so it doesn't impact us. But the bottom line is this is kind of a global problem. This is not just the United States problem. It's not just a Turkey problem. And while we can be thankful that it's not reached this level here as of yet, the key word there, based on how often these things are popping up, is yet. We have seen that even pro athletes, even highly paid athletes, are not immune to the temptation. Online gambling is as easy as buying something off of Amazon. You just click a button and it's done. And we have seen that integrity is not guaranteed, even in well-funded leagues. Before sports gambling blew up here in this country, we figured, well, there'll never be another Black Sox scandal because these guys are getting compensated at a level those guys weren't getting compensated at, right? Eddie Seacott, because he didn't win 30 games, got screwed by Charles Comiskey. The NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, this scandal is a reminder integrity is a constant effort. Oversight must be constant. And it's not just money that does that. You have to be looking at all times to be focused on this type of stuff. And players and referees are not immune to the temptation. And the betting boom makes vigilance even more, we're still really in this country kind of new to legalized sports betting. It's not, maybe 10 years old? I think Jersey was the first state to kind of really get this thing started. And even then, it's not that long ago that this was not something that happens. And what the Turkish scandal shows you how quickly things spiral if oversight cannot keep up with opportunity. And the opportunity, we know where that is. The opportunity is constant at every single day, every single game, every single outcome with the baseball players or the NBA players. It's every single thing that happens. The micro bets of a pitched ball to start an inning, a strike, a ball, a home run, everything can be bet on. So the opportunity is constant, which means the vigilance has to be just as focused. So the Turkish scandal is basically the worst case scenario of what happens, where at this point, I don't know what Turkish fans think, but we talk about the integrity. How can there be any integrity where basically all these players and referees are involved? And the referees, that's another main point. We love to accuse fans of the officials being biased. Well, Turkey just proved that the officials might be the most vulnerable group when you're talking to a sport, right? If you're talking about fixing an outcome, 371 referees with betting accounts, 10,000 bets from a single guy. Again, how did he have time to even officiate the matches? Bets on matches that they actually officiated. The players will always get the most attention, but the officials, if you want to rig something, it would seem like if you get an official or two, it's a lot easier, and maybe the scrutiny is not as high as it would be on a player watching them constantly. So if it can happen there, it can happen anywhere. And I think also the technology thing kind of cuts both ways, and I brought this point up before, that more betting means more data. But that also has to lead to more monitoring. Now, the companies, the legal ones, they are monitoring this stuff. They have teams to watch this stuff all the time. But player tracking and prop bets and in-game wagering and manipulation of opportunities, high betting volume can kind of hide some fraudulent activity. But luckily, I think in this country, our tech is probably a little bit more sophisticated, so that we're ahead of them technology-wise. So maybe the technology will be able to catch this kind of stuff. But it shows you how quickly things can become unmanageable if systems are not linked. But this, I think the final takeaway for me is this should make fans appreciate how hard integrity is for all these leagues. And look, these leagues, they kind of brought this on themselves by taking the money. The money was there. It was going to be happening anyway. So these leagues are businesses at the end of the day. But their number one job has to be make sure that this does not happen in America. And at least the one, I guess, final takeaway is that they can't say that they weren't warned at this point. If you're watching the news, if I can find out about this on my lovely TikTok account, Adam Silvers and Rob Manfreds and Roger Goodell's have to be all aware of this as well.
Remember college? Well, now, college is over, and here comes your student loan debt. Is your private student loan debt keeping you up at night? You really need to talk to YRefi. YRefi refinances distressed or defaulted private student loans that others won't touch. They can save you thousands of dollars and get you a custom payment that you can afford. And they don't care what your credit score is. Don't let private student loan debt ruin your life. Call YRefi today.
Okay, finally, have you ever seen the movie Friday Night Lights? Billy Bob Thornton? I'm not sure what year that came out, but it preceded the TV show Friday Night Lights on NBC. The movie was based on a book which recounted a true life football team from Texas high school football, the 1988 Perriman Panthers. And that year, at the end of the regular season, they have this amazing regular season, and they end up tied with two other teams for the final two playoff spots. And the way they decide, there's no strength of schedule, there's no computer formula, it's 1988. What they decide is the coaches involved drive to a truck stop and they flip coins. And whoever is the odd man out, their team is the odd man out. And it became one of the most memorable scenes in the movie. But of course, that was 40 years ago. Clearly, they're not still doing that in Texas, right? Actually, they are. Last week in Plainview, Texas, outside a Valero gas station, the head coaches from three teams, Lubbock High, Amarillo High, and Caprock, met late at night to settle a three-way tie for only one playoff spot. So in the movie, it's two. This one, it was only one. And just like that scene from the book, lots of things have changed since 1988. This is not one of them. They still decided it with a single coin flip. And the video went viral right away. Hundreds of thousands of views. You got these three coaches all holding their coins like their life is in their hands. And with as religious as they take high school football in Texas, it basically was holding their lives in their hands. And it didn't have to be this way. It was certainly more dramatic. Caprock, they had their playoff fate in their hands. They lost the final game of their regular season. So that meant that Lubbock or Amarillo would have to lose for Caprock to get in on their own. Both of them won. Amarillo rolled to a blowout win, where Lubbock, they finally got a win against this other team, Coronado. They had not beaten them in like 4 decades. They finally get a win against them. This massive victory for their program, but one that did not send them to the playoffs automatically because of this three-way tie. So the coaches, they have done what I guess it's generations of coaches have done. It didn't start, I don't think, in the 80s. It started before that, but they figured out a place to meet that was halfway between all three. The one coach put his team, his young kids to bed. He showed up. The coach at Lubbock brought his coordinators, but they all showed up ready to roll with their coin and ready to decide their playoff fate based on that one thing. And this time, unlike in the previous one, the movie, where two coaches move on, this time it's only one guy. And the beauty of it is no do-overs, no interference, no best of threes, there's no warm-up tosses, one flip, everything riding on it. And Lubbock and Caprock, they both landed on heads. Amarillo got tails. So the fact that they were the odd man out, they are the ones that are moving on because there's only one spot. And the other teams saw their season end, not on the playoff field, but through a coin flip in the middle of the night at a gas station. And I guess what stands out, the good part of it, everybody handled it very well. There was no bitterness, there was no finger pointing, no resentment. Just 3 coaches who understood the magnitude of the moment, and they respected the flip of the coin, and they had to know what an emotional toll that was going to take on their kids, right? They're high school kids, and it's got to be a complete gut punch that this is the way that you have your season come to an end. And for Amarillo, it's a great celebration based on the coin flip, but for the other 2, very, very difficult. And I guess we live in this age of instant information with college football uses these elaborate ranking systems, and the NFL, the power rankings, and all these real-time completion percentage probabilities of this and that, and win probabilities. And even high school, you can get high school scores beamed to your phone on apps that are updated every second. And yet here in Texas, a state that treats its high school football like a national religion, at the end of the day, coin flip at a gas station still decides who goes to the playoffs. And look, I think it's a little chaotic. It's certainly heartbreaking, but it kind of just shows you that there is no perfect system outside of deciding it on the field. And it is absolutely, unmistakably Texas high school football. And I think a lot of times we complain about how technology is overtaking our lives. I don't know if the kids that lost out because of a coin flip are going to be complaining about wanting less technology. I think that there probably is a more fair way, but at least so far, I don't know it. And I'm not going to be the one to convince Texas high school football to change it. They've not changed it since 1980. All right, that's going to do it for another episode of Gordon Damer on Sports. If you've not already, hit that subscribe button, rate, like, and subscribe the episode, and we'll be back later this week with a fresh edition of Gordon Damer on Sports.